Right, I'll do that. Thank you. So yes, the method and tools, we've actually got two presentations here that are going to be method and tools related. Dr. Van Botten will have the next one here, following my talk. So anyhow, there's the list of membership, current membership of the group. There's typically, four of us on the calls that we have: Michelle, Jasper, Michael, and myself. The rest of you, these people have received invitations and are welcome to join us at any time. And of course, any member is welcome to be part of the group and participate. And we do ask for feedback on a number of the papers, the errata and clarification documents, things like that are actually issued by the SIG. We do ask for feedback from everybody that's a member. Michelle has coordinated that a number of times, haven't you? So, ongoing activities, we do get together quite a few times. First Wednesday of the month, we have a general conference call where we're discussing the various common interfaces that we're working on. I think we just released utilities as it's out for peer review, but we've gone through a number of the different interfaces and have made errata and clarifications to help with them. There's a Flowsheet Monitoring call on the second Wednesday of the month. We're trying to finalize the specification for the Flowsheet Monitoring interface. I think that, for me, is an important one because, when I talk about some of the work that we want to do at EPA, Flowsheet Monitoring gets us the information out of the simulation package that'll enable some of the analysis of the flow sheet with the green engineering aspects that we're interested in. So to me, that one's important. The object model, last Wednesday of the month, that's another call. We've been going over the development of the object model. We've done a phase 1 development, which Jasper will present here. And if you are interested in getting involved, please let me know or Michelle know, and we'll get you on the invitations for the conference calls. And Michelle will include you in the conference call meeting, and you can participate. Our charter, improve integration, expand utilization of CAPE applications, across the enterprise. Some of what the first presentation this morning, there was some enterprise, cross-enterprise applications there, developing the different mechanisms for use of CAPE within other application domains, and incorporating advances in IT into the CAPE platform. We're resolving interface issues, common interfaces, develop and maintain standards, incorporate advances, and identify novel uses. We really haven't changed our charter the past couple of years. We've just moved through different things that we've had to deal with. So this year we've completed and published two different errata and clarifications, and I'll talk about what those contain here in the next couple of slides. And then we do have some ongoing projects. The type library is actually Malcolm's. I'm not trying to steal that from you, but we do consult with, or Malcolm does consult with our group. Malcolm and Michael Howland do consult with our group on various issues related to the type library and interop assembly. As a matter of fact, I think the type library came out of one of the first things that we did with
the request came from you.
Yes, it came from us, and it activated your group. So yes, and that's been half a dozen years ago or so. We've put out the errata and clarifications for comments. Air handling issues, we've talked about them a number of times, and I think we're at a point now with going through utilities persistence parameters where we can actually maybe take a bite at that apple and see if we can try to make some progress on it. Flowsheet Monitoring and Phobia are the two. The name Phobia, we had a telephone conversation, probably 45 minutes, trying to find a name for the object model, because the acronym COOM just did not seem very good at the time. We were trying to figure that one out. Phobia is actually a fish. They're, you know, I grew up in South Florida, so they would be, some of the fish would be off the coast down there. We'll have to come up with a fishish logo at some point, you know, that works for that. So maybe some kind of variation on, was it the Greg Norman shark or something? I don't know. So anyhow, so that's the projects we're working on. The type library, as we mentioned with Malcolm, we made the recommendation for the development. The interoperability SIG has been responsible for the development. They've asked us for some input at various times. Code signing, the installation package was one of the issues that they asked us for support on. Recently, they asked us about was it iPersist Stream interface and getting that to work, because iPersist Stream inherits iPersist, and in .NET interface inheritance like that isn't allowed. So we actually have to put in the the get class ID method, and I think we can hide it or override it. Is it overriding, right? I think we had to put that method in. So now the current PIA that's being distributed is Cosine, and CAPE-OPEN does maintain a code signing certificate for that. So I persist stream some of the deployment issues, and one of the issues right now that's probably hot and heavy is the MSI merge module issue, and Michael here has a lot of experience in dealing with that issue, along with Jasper, and hopefully we'll get that resolved so that you can install and reference count from the MSI or the merge module. And then we peer reviewed the development guidelines that the interoperability SIG provided. Okay, completed errata and clarification documents. What's important here is the second bullet point, which is the review process for the documents for review and publication. Michelle has sent out a number of requests from us for review and comment. We've received a number of very useful, very helpful comments on the documents. As a matter of fact, one of them from Oliver ended up actually, we put together a frequently asked questions type of a document, which hopefully will come out and get finalized here in the next year or so, that talk about the processes for initiating CAPE-OPEN interfaces, or adding interfaces to the CAPE-OPEN standard, as well as, you know, the process for developing it, the peer review, the role of the different SIGs and the management board in some of these things too. So, you know, I mean, we do take the comments seriously, and we do prepare a document that discusses how we resolve the comment, or what our thinking was on the design choice sometimes that we've made, and why it was the one that we did. So those are also available on the repository hosting IDL file folder. So you should all have access to that. If you don't, then reach out to Michelle. He's the one that controls that. The errata and clarification. About 2 weeks ago, I actually pulled down the documentation set zip file, and I was surprised to find that they had all been incorporated in there, because I think it had been a year or so or two since the last time I pulled it down. So those are now even available on the website, and, you know, definitely reiterate that we do appreciate the review comments, and we do believe that they make the final product a better product. So, parameter comments interface. Some of the things that we dealt with there. Real parameters. I think the upper bound on that one was listed as actually being a read-write value. We changed that to read-only. And the default parameter value was also, for integers, was also changed to read-only. The specification as a whole for the parameters was intended to be read-only in the original document. Those erratas helped clarify or to fix that problem. And the read-write ability on that had some implications for different PMEs that would scan the parameter collection, and it dealt with the issue of when the PME actually has to go through the parameters and when parameters can be modified, and when the PME knows that it needs to go through and recheck the parameters, which should improve some performance issues with different PMEs. Okay, parameter specification and validation. Like I said, the parameter specification was made read-only. The validation, one of the issues there was we had a validation mechanism in place, but there really wasn't a statement of why parameters should be validated or what you were doing when you validated them. So we actually did come up with a list of validation criteria. And to me, some of the PMEs historically had not allowed parameter values to be set invalid to an invalid number or value. And I think about things like temperatures and your temperature range for a model. If the temperature range is just outside of that one that the model allows, it may be an invalid parameter because it's outside the range. If you choose temperature as being a parameter for the PMC that you're using, but does that necessarily mean that? What does that mean to the PMC? And that's up to the PMC to decide. But the parameter itself, there shouldn't be a problem with the validation standard there. Dimensionality. We did clarify dimensionality. I think we added the flag that allowed for absolute versus relative values. And was that the only change? I think that was the only change there. And we did put together an array parameter specification and actually formalized something for that. It's a variant within COM. It's a variant array. There's a general parameter, array parameter, which would actually allow for the parameter elements to be different types, as well as being variants themselves, which could be another layer of a nested array, essentially within the parameter. So it's a very broadly defined one. But there's also a homogeneous array parameter, which is all one type with one set of specifications or a consistent set of specifications. It can either be the same specification object or multiple specification objects that are the same, have the same, reflect the same. And then typically the idea behind the homogeneous array was an array of doubles that the range on them, the specification was consistent across the parameter. So I should go back. Any questions on what we did with this one? With the parameter specification? Okay. Persistence common interfaces. We did put together a brief description of the COM persistence, clarified what the interfaces are and how they're used in terms of CAPE-OPEN. What are the responsibilities of the PMC and the PME? within the persistence process, and what the PMCs actually are required to save and restore. Okay, these are important concepts here as to making sure that you get back what you saved when you when you go through a persist and restore cycle. Okay, fallback persistence, data type requirements for the property bag that for PMCs that use the IK property or the iPersist property bag, and then this will also relate in with the utilities common interface errata and clarification document that says in preparation. I think that's actually out for review. That provides an overview of the object life cycle. Remember, the utilities interface has an initialize and a terminate method, and the issues that we had to deal with here was when are those initialize and terminate methods called. One of the points that we made too was that the simulation context can be set early in the process, one of the first things you can do. That way you get advantage of the ICAPE diagnostic interface to be able to log or have user messages related to any problems that occur during the creation of a PMC instance. Any questions on utilities at this point? Yes, again, out for peer review, please provide commentary, clarification, primary PMC objects that require ICAPE utilities. When some of the standards were initially developed, some of the utilities functionality were included within the business interfaces. I think 093 or 090 for ICAPE unit did include an initialize and a terminate method, and 1.0 didn't. It moved that into the utilities. So that's part of what's being clarified there. And it helps us understand what a primary PMC object is. They're the objects that are basically created directly by the PME or created through a system like a property package is created through a thermo system. The property package itself is a primary PMC that will require ICAPE utilities. Okay. Edit method return value, 0, which is an SOK. H result is indicates that the PMC was modified, and if you return a S false, the PMC remains unmodified, and you don't actually have to, the PME doesn't actually have to do any actions on them to, say, re-enumerate parameters or ports on a PMC where the edit returned as false. What we're trying to do is change the function signature of the edit method so that the edit would return a Boolean true or false that would be that would let us determine whether or not the PMC had been modified, let the PME know whether the PMC had been modified, and by using the H result return and as the edit method return, that gave us that ability without having to modify the function itself and modify the type library at this point. It should also be noted that both SOK and SFalse are success H results because the lead bit, the first bit in the 32-bit sequence is still 0 in both of these cases. A failure H result would have first bit of 1 or a negative value, or, well, I say negative value if it's a signed integer. Not sure if you can look at it as an unsigned too. Either way. So the simulation context must be set prior to initialization. That way you can have ICAPE diagnostics available, and then the PMC object lifecycle steps are enumerated so you can see what things happen when in the life cycle, and things happen the way they're expected. Again, please, if you have a copy, if you received it, please take a look at it, get us back your comments. We'd like to finish that one up. With regard to errors, we've identified some issues with it, complexity, and I think probably this third bullet point here, most CAPE-OPEN objects only expose eCAPE root and return the eCAPE unknown H result if an error occurs. So there's no way to know what actually the error was, despite the fact that you have a large number of error H results that could be returned if an error does occur, along with all of the COM type of error H results too. But originally, the objects were required to expose all those interfaces, and then there was no use of the error info API within COM, which if we could actually set an error object, you could get some type of a textual requirement back. So basically, the error conditions from COM are not transparent. As a result, logging tools are used to identify the causes of the problems, and we're trying to come to terms with what a errata clarification document will cover with regard to errors. This has been backburnered for other issues like persistence and parameters and utilities. So I think this is probably our next big issue, along with the Phobia issues, how Phobia is going to be handling the error handling work, which I believe that's part of your talk today, Jasper.
I'll make it fire.
You'll make it better. You'll say a word or two. Add a word or two. Okay. Flowsheet monitoring. We're currently developing this. We're finishing up the use cases. We have a preliminary interface put together, and we need to check the consistency of what the methods are in the interfaces with the use cases, and then get the document out for peer review. I'm hoping, if the sun shines brightly on us, and hopefully next year I can actually say that this document has been released because it's been through peer review. But this has been a long time coming. Jasper and I, Jasper's idea originally, and he and I put together, I put together an application that did the EPA war algorithm, which was developed in our group, and it's actually included with the COCO distribution. And I do need to write a installer so that we can update that, because that hasn't been updated in a number of years. But I do have a version of it that uses the new type library instead of the interface implementations that I had in C# that I developed years ago. So those will finally disappear, I guess. Anyhow, any questions on Flowsheet monitoring? Or I think I went right through utilities as well, right? Or anything? Okay. Here's use case map for the Flowsheet monitoring. We have Flowsheet user and the PME. Flowsheet user tells PME to do certain things, create the component, load restore from persistence, along with event-driven activation or user-invoked implementation of the component. You can save it, delete it from the flow sheet. The monitoring component then can monitor the flow sheet, which allows it to get the solution status for the flow sheet. These two, solution status and validation status for the flow sheet, are new enumerated types that are being added to the specification. Basically, the solution status, some monitoring activities are really only useful if the flow sheet are solved. Other applications may not necessarily require that. Okay. Same thing is true with the validation status. And then you can get the unit operation objects or the stream objects of the flow sheet, which will allow you to go through the object graph. These gets, by the way, are supposed to be read-only. You should not be able to modify the parameters or the ports within the unit operations or the flow sheet, the streams. So, and next slide. Okay, so these are a couple of the use cases that we're developing on: firing the event, handling the event, the validation of the monitoring component itself. So there are a total of 19 different use cases within the monitoring component interface at this point, the specification at this point. Okay, current status, save a flow sheet, restore. Again, this is a little bit more detail on some of the from the first figure here. Okay, any questions on monitoring at this point? No? Okay. Phobia, we laid out a three-phase development plan to the management board to enable us to move forward. Jasper is going to present the phase 1 proof of concept development phase, which we're implementing the core technical components, the registration component, instantiation of the PMCs by the PME, and that's demonstrated both from a Phobia based PME, which is a small, it'll just has a material object and attaches a thermodynamic property package to that material object. So we're doing that from the Phobia-based PME on a COM-based PMC, as well as the other way around, COM-based PMC, creating a Phobia PME. One of the key requirements for the management board to move forward on phase 1 was to demonstrate the interoperability between COM and Phobia, that it was a seamless process, and we're using the 1.1 thermo interface set to do that. That was an important requirement for that, and it works quite well. Jasper developed a small package called Combia, C-O-M-B-I-A, which he will, I'm sure, mention as part of his talk, that actually does that interfacing. And then the next phase is a full native Windows C++ based implementation, where we actually have the ability to expand to all of the CAPE-OPEN business interfaces, so that we now can actually develop PMEs and PMCs strictly in Phobia, and you can we don't have to use COM at all in the process. So we would have an entirely Windows-based non-COM CAPE-OPEN. And then the third phase is adding in cross-platform interoperability. .NET is one of the planned platforms that we want to implement. Other platforms can be added as identified by the membership of CO-LaN. Some of them may be easier than others. So anyhow, Java comes to mind. I don't know if people are doing development in Java, but .NET is definitely well used. Okay, phase 1. Again, the registry components were created. We did some standardization of the data types. The same source code has been compiled on a variety of different, using a variety of different compilers, Visual C++ and Intel C++ on Windows, and GCC on both Windows and Linux. So we actually have the ability to use the same code base on both Windows and Linux. And hopefully that would mean that if somebody developed a PME on based upon Phobia, it could run under both the Windows or the Linux operating systems just by recompiling it on the appropriate operating system with the appropriate compiler. Some of the windowing issues may not, the GUI type issues may need to be done differently on the different platforms, so you may need two sets of GUI for it, but that's a different problem, I guess. And in demonstration of the COM-Phobia interop, and as I said, the COM property package was used by a Phobia material object, and a Phobia property package used by a COM PME. And it was tested across a number of 3 or 4 PMEs have been tested at this point, I believe, as well as multiple COM property packages. So Jasper will go into details on the development of Phobia. Phase 2, we've asked the management board to begin phase 2. I should have asked Michelle what the status of that was when we had a few moments. Anyhow, so again, this is to bring out the full set of CAPE-OPEN interfaces, as well as full COM and Phobia interop. And we also want to talk about what interfaces we need to maintain going forward. I'll show a slide here in a moment with the status of the interfaces that are out there, the business specifications that are out there, and then, of course, future cross-platform development. Maintenance and support would be an ongoing obligation. We do need to update the M&T guidelines, the method and tool guidelines that were developed probably back in that was in the global CAPE-OPEN or the 2001 time frame. We do need to document it. The code has some documentation in it, as well as distributing the source code and the binaries and other ongoing support. And then Jasper will make his technical presentation next on Phobia. These are the business specifications that are out there, along with what SIG is currently responsible for maintaining them. There's a big chunk of them here: optimization, estimation, PDAs, planning and scheduling, sequential modulator, sequencing tools and solvers that don't have a home right at the present time. They used to belong to numerics, and there really isn't an active numerics SIG. So those, we need to decide how to move forward with those. There is some overlap amongst the currently unsupported interfaces, so that maybe there doesn't need to be as many. You can incorporate, maybe you incorporate PDA and solvers together. Planning and scheduling may be part of optimization. Those types of things can be done. So typically, the interfaces that are in question here don't really have a lot of use that we're aware of. I think there may be some minor use of these, and then our recommendations for what needs to be done here. We need a numerics SIG to support or retire the solvers, the optimization, PDAE. ThermoSig, update and replace, which is a current activity of theirs, the physical property database and the chemical reactions database. the interface specifications right now are general enough that we can use the same methods in Phobia as in COM with little change. So what currently exists may need some cleanup, but these activities are currently ongoing too. Excuse me. Petroleum fractions unit and thermo-SIG are working on deprecating the unused interfaces like SMST. There are a limited number of methods here. There's a unique solution for partitioning that most PMEs handle internally. So I don't know whether or not we really need the SMST interfaces. Flowsheet monitoring does provide access to the object graph, which would be one of the things that I think came out of SMST as well. As well as what do we want to do with the parameter estimation, data reconciliation, scheduling, and planning. So we do have some work to do with cleaning up the interface specification set. And then our roadmap for Phobia, phase 1 development is complete. This year we'd like to complete the phase 1 and phase 2 and phase 3 development, which would mean COM, full set of interfaces, the full COM Phobia interop, as well as getting .NET, and then working with the other SIGs to transition to Phobia. Phobia will require its own IDL for the interfaces, but like I said, the documents that we have right now can be used to develop the Phobia IDL, just like it was used to develop the COM IDL. And then 2017, 2018, roll out Phobia. Hopefully we'll see a Phobia PME or two out there. I figure we'll see one in the form of Kofi, since Jasper's been very involved in Phobia development. So that's the roadmap for that. Any questions on the Phobia aspects? All right. What do we plan to do? Finalize the unit utilities, errata and clarification, finalize the flowsheet monitoring interface specification, and complete the Phobia phase 2 and 3 development. We'll do some work with errors, parameters, and persistence within Phobia. So Phobia will have its own persistence methodologies. And then I have to put up a disclaimer to say that the agency doesn't necessarily have views on this, so all right, I'll do that.